Right, morning everybody. I think it's time we make a start. I'm absolutely delighted to welcome you all to our first Sharing Leading Practice event of our 2021 partnership year. Sharing Leading Practice events were what were formerly known as Leadership Development Days. These are opportunities for schools within our network with an accredited area of excellence to share best practice. And we're really thrilled to be able to offer a diverse programme of virtual events this term. I think whilst COVID has definitely presented a fair few challenges, not least to yourselves, and we're really in awe at Challenge Partners at the amazing work that's going on in schools at the moment. I think there's definitely a few positives to be drawn from it as well. And one of the real positives for us at Challenge Partners is now how easy it is to share excellent practice the length and breadth of the country. And I really hope that you'll be able to join us for some of our future events after this session as well. For now, though, it gives me great pleasure to introduce you to Rachel Linkletter and Elin Jones, who are both from Salusbury Primary School, which is part of our Chrysalis hub in North London. Rachel is a deputy head teacher and Elin is the reading lead at Salusbury. And they do a huge amount of work within their school around reading and comprehension, even hosting teachers from as far as Denmark, I believe. So they've prepared a really fantastic session for you all, and I hope you get lots out of this.
Morning, everyone. So as Georgina said, both myself, Rachel Linkletter, and Elin, I'm going to present to you today. So I'm Rachel Linkletter. I'm the deputy head at Salisbury Primary.
And I'm Elin Jones, and I'm a Year 6 teacher, but I'm also a reading leader at Salisbury as well.
So I'll just start off by telling you a little bit about Salisbury and the context, and then we can go into sort of how we approached our reading. So Salisbury is a 3-form entry primary in northwest London, and where it's located, we've kind of got a mix of children, really. It's an area that's rapidly gentrifying, so we've got a large part of the population who come under that catchment, and then we're also on the edge of a council estate. There's a really diverse mixed background. So when we thought about our reading, we really wanted to make sure that we had a system that really promoted the greater depth element of reading and really stretched those children for whom the stretch was important, but also for those children who were starting English was a second language to them, children who might not have the same support at home, that really we brought their reading up as quickly as possible and got them to the expected standard of reading. So really we need reading to have a dual purpose in our school. So that's kind of one of the starting points that we had. So one of the things that we thought about when we thought about introducing our reading systems in school is that we've looked at Scarborough's reading rope, which many of you may well be familiar with. So Scarborough talks about having different strands to teaching reading effectively. There's the word recognition element, which you can see at the bottom, and I think lots of schools do that really, really well now. We all have a phonics program in place, and we really spend a lot of time on sight recognition and decoding, and that's one of the main elements of reading. However, there's also the language comprehension elements, and for that to be effective, children need to have good background knowledge of what they're reading. They need to have knowledge of the vocabulary, language structures, verbal reasoning, as well as literacy knowledge and the ability to, what is a text and how to open books and things like that. So we really wanted to think about a reading system that covered both of these elements of reading. So we're going to talk to you today about the systems and programs that we use at Salisbury and how we've adapted them to meet the needs of our children. And then hopefully we'll have some time to talk about how you could implement them in your school if it's something that you think would benefit your children. So these are all the different elements that we use in our school. So I've broken out the different strands from Scarborough's model. So we'll start with the word recognition. So we have a phonics program, as I'm sure you all do, that starts in early years and continues through Key Stage 1 and perhaps into Key Stage 2 for those children who might need it. And that's taught daily. We use the Read Write Inc program, or a version of Read Write Inc, but I know there's a whole range of phonics programs that many of you will use. So phonics is definitely a key part of the reading system. We also use a spelling, punctuation and grammar program that Elin has designed along with the other teachers, that starts in late Key Stage 1 in Year 2 for those children who are really confident with their phonics, and then all through Key Stage 2. So that kind of covers that word recognition strand. And then the main focus for us was the language comprehension strand. So we use daily supported reader as an element of our reading provision, and that starts in year 1 for the majority of children. Later on, I'll show you how we've kind of joined the systems together. So more able children may well start at the end of reception. So we use our daily supported reader system, which is a daily reading program, and that covers all of these elements. And we're going to break that out a little bit for you later. We also have a high focus on vocabulary in all areas of our curriculum, and that's been a key part of our reading program as well. We use things like knowledge organisers, there's vocabulary in the classroom, so that it's not just within our reading lessons. We're encouraging those reading skills throughout the whole curriculum all day. And again, with our oral language, the oral language is a key part of our whole, I'm going to go back, of our whole curriculum. It's a key part of our whole curriculum. So for example, the children's ability to explain their answers in maths. They're really insistent on those whole sentences, correct vocabulary, and being able to explain themselves. And the oral language, is, as Elin will talk to you about, really underpins the children's ability to have reading comprehension and high levels of comprehension skills. And so linked to that, we use Destination Reader as our reading programme in Key Stage 2. We begin it in mid-year 2, and we really focus on that oral comprehension. So just as an example, a contextual example of what I mean by this. So some of you may be familiar with this text. If you taught year 2 in previous years, you'll have seen it. It was what was called a level 3 text for year 2 children, so your greater depth year 2 children. I've just pulled out a paragraph from it that we would expect children to understand. I'm going to slightly unpick some of the things that children need to know to even be able to access this paper. So first of all, there's the vocabulary knowledge. Does the child know what a miller is? Dutch, proud, beams, they're all quite advanced vocabulary for a child of that age. If they don't understand what those words mean, they've already lost a large amount of understanding within that text. Then we've got the contextual background knowledge that they're going to need to bring to really understand this text properly. So it talks about windmills. How many children will know what a windmill is, whether it's this, or many children, particularly in our context, for example, in London, many are going to very unlikely to have seen a windmill in real life. If they have, it may well be one of the wind turbine farms or off the edge of London, and they might be bringing that into their mind. You know, they may think that's a windmill. So it's really making sure they understand what that kind of element is, because that's going to play into the main part of the text. Again, what does a Dutch village look like? I don't know what a village is, and how does a Dutch village vary from an English village? I've got a couple of photos here. The top one is of a Dutch village, and then the photo underneath is probably what many of our children will be living in. That's their experience of where people would live, and the differences between those two, and how that's going to impact on their reading of the text. And finally, just from this paragraph, they kind of need to know that cats like to chase mice. And you know, why is that important? You know, why is the cat chasing the mice and things like that? So again, they've got to have all of that knowledge to come to the text before they can even begin to understand some of the comprehension questions that may be asked of them. Language structures. So we've got here, well, Nico ground grain. So they've got to understand that's the past tense. What does it mean by ground grain? You know, if they're just decoding the words, they might read the word ground and they're thinking of the ground that we stand on, not realizing it's the past tense of grind. And again, that's going to build up that picture for them when they're unpicking that text. So as you can see, for our greater depth readers and for our children who want to have a really high level of comprehension, they need to bring all of these elements to the text before they can even start to unpick the questions that may be asked of them. So for us, it was really important for our reading programs to start teaching the children the skills to be able to do that from the start. So we really work with our children from year 1 to be able to practice these skills and develop them at texts that might be at their decoding level. And I'll put here, so Alex, for those of you who may have read Alex Quigley's Closing the Reading Gap book, he talks about this text as well. and goes into a little more detail. So as you can already see, reading is a really complex subject to teach. And so how do we expect our teachers to be skilled at teaching it? We really thought about the professional development for our staff and how we support our staff to teach what is a really complex subject. The most recent information I found from TeacherTap showed that only 68% of teachers felt confident at teaching reading. So that means you've got almost a third of the staff in the country not confident at teaching what is a core part of the day. For NQTs, that dropped even lower, and only 42% were confident at teaching it. Now, I think a lot of that is to do with the teacher training programs now. There's a large amount of focus on the systematic phonics programs, and that's really important. That is a cornerstone of reading. But the other elements that we've already identified that are important at reading, perhaps teachers haven't had as much experience at teaching those, don't know how to unpick those things with teachers, and aren't sure how to break it down enough to be able to teach those skills to staff. And so that's something that we really wanted to develop at Salisbury, and to focus on that professional development of the staff so that they're confident enough to be able to teach reading to the children. So we thought we'd start by giving you a chance to have a chat with each other and thinking about how you currently support your teachers with the teaching of reading at your school. For those teachers who aren't confident or those who are new to the profession, what do you do in your school to support the teachers at teaching reading? I think in a moment, Georgina's going to, with the power of Zoom, put us into breakout rooms. It'd be really good just to have a chat amongst yourselves in your little group, and maybe come up with one key thing or a couple of key things that people in your group do to teach reading, and maybe put it into the chat so that we can kind of see what other people are doing currently, and then we can see how that might differ from what we do or not at Salisbury.
That is, yeah.
I'm having a look at the chat and seeing some of the things people have put in. So I can see a couple of people said that they important in their groups, such as by just sticking to a set scheme. I think that's really important. It is about really upskilling the teachers and making sure they've got that really wide toolkit to be able to teach reading effectively and not rely on a pre-programmed scheme, definitely. And Elin, when I switch over to Elin in just a moment, she's going to really talk about that, particularly in Key Stage 2.
Absolutely, yeah. And I've actually also just seen that there's, we've got somebody here that mentions videoing the teachers actually teaching, and I'm actually going to talk a little bit more about that and why, particularly with everything going on in the post-COVID world, or currently going on at the moment, why we do need to adapt our training for our teachers to match exactly what's going on. So it's really great to hear that actually people are adapting.
Okay, so I'll click through and let Elin lead into her part.
Hello, yes. So good morning, everybody. So now I'm going to be talking mainly about reading in Key Stage 2, and just mainly thinking about the questions if your teachers have exactly got a clear understanding of the reading progression. And today I'm going to be talking about exactly how we do that at Salisbury, and also the key thing about if they've got the language skills and the confidence, because if they've got the language skills and the confidence, they are able to transfer that across to the children. And that's been really the main focus for the last 3 years here at Salisbury. So I appreciate this is a lot of information to take in. So after the Zoom, feel free to go over this. But this is just a general overview of exactly what the national curriculum highlights about reading in Key Stage 2. And I've tried to break it down, basically. We've tried to break it down into 3 main areas. And the first one is mainly word reading and how that differs in Key Stage 2. So it's less about decoding and mainly about text prosody, text prosody. And it's basically about how the author intended the text to actually sound, how they intended it to be read out, and the understanding that comes with that. And obviously then moving on to the next section, which is all about comprehension. And comprehension, obviously, of the text, but also of the questions that come afterwards, because whilst we focus a lot on reading, we all know that the questions and the tests and the exams, that is also a really key part as well. And the final section really is just basically about the breadth of reading, about how much experience the children have got, if they were able to perform it, how it sounds, and everything sort of really works together in Key Stage 2. And basically the most effective reading lessons keep all these 3 areas in mind. So on the next slide, we'll be able to see how we have tried to do it at Salisbury. We try to Salisburyfy it. And obviously we do use the Destination Reader programme, but we have really tailored it to suit our school setting. And that's the most important thing. And that's why it's worked so well. So with word reading, if you look at the first slide, this first section, this is how we really focus a lot on independent learning and independent reading based on the learning behaviours and partner work. So we basically try, certainly by the end of Key Stage 2, to get the children as independent as possible, to become independent readers when they move on to inter-secondary school. And how we do that is basically through direct teaching of reading, 15 minutes of modelling with a teacher every single day. So it's less about the old guided reading system, and it's more about modelling to children, teaching them explicitly how to become independent readers. And we give as much opportunity for that independent talk as possible. Moving on to the middle column, then obviously talking about comprehension, how we get the children to understand and comprehend the text is through a set of really clear, structured strategies. And I've just broken them all down there. This is obviously based on the Destination Reader programme, but again, we do adapt it to fit in with our school. And then moving on to the question area, every single day, we obviously focus mainly on reading, but we also want to have an opportunity as teachers to make sure that the children actually do understand how to apply what they've understood in the text into questioning, and basically get them to understand what the question is actually asking them. So every single day, I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. We've got targeted selfie type work, and I'll talk you through that later. And also test techniques. So again, we teach test techniques explicitly. And then finally, again, the breadth of reading in Salisbury, we basically make sure we focus on high quality of texts. And the focus is on talk as well, partner work, discussion, teacher modelling. And also, as Rachel said before, we combine all areas of the curriculum to really give the children as much experience as possible. But yeah, please feel free after the Zoom to have a closer look at all these details. I'm aware that there's quite a lot of writing there. So just very quickly, this is mainly the lesson structures. So the main thing about the lessons is that they are incredibly high-paced, engaging, and they focus, the child-focused, the child-led. And a lot of it, before the reading, we set them up for success. So before the class reading, we go through all of the pitfalls that potentially could inhibit the children from actually truly understanding the text and therefore enjoying the reading. So very quickly, we recap or we introduce any new texts that we're talking about, any new context. So for example, the windmill, we'd show pictures, we show vocabulary, and we also talk to the children about learning behaviours. So we explicitly teach the style of learning behaviours that the children need in order to become those independent and confident readers that actually enjoy reading. Again, moving on to this section here, but obviously we model as well. So the teachers really, really model how to become good readers, thinking aloud, displaying the text. And we also have a big focus on mixed ability partners, so that the children are able to practice their strategies with lots and lots of different classmates. And then the independent reading takes place in the middle section, and that's the longest part. And in that independent reading section, the teachers are, instead of working with one group, as we previously would have done years ago, the teachers are now able to move around the room, working with different children, particularly with focused children they want to read with that particular day. And because the children have had the support and the scaffolding to become independent readers, they can use everything they've learned into practice. And that's why really the independent reading takes so long in the middle. We have mini plenaries as well, so that basically builds up the talk and reading stamina for them. So obviously it's very different in year 2 to the way that it would look in year 6. And then at the end, after reading, we take a snapshot, as it were, of all of the learning. We do this from Monday all the way through to Thursday. We celebrate good strategies, so the teachers and the TAs can say, I've noticed these partners over here, they were working fantastically together. And it also offers the children to self-reflect, so they get to rate and think about exactly what sort of readers they were in that particular lesson. And the main focus of our lessons is mainly about reading, but we also want the children to have that practice of getting their ideas down on paper. And it's very, very short activities we do. And that's what we call them selfies. So they're like a snapshot of the learning. They're really quick because the main focus is on the independent reading, the reading oracy, and the enjoyment of reading, rather than getting all that writing down. So thinking about obviously the next section, it's all about catching up. So obviously I'm aware that lots of you will come from different areas, and reading might be at different stages in your school. And we really at Salisbury wanted to think about how exactly we'd get children to catch up. And of course, although children are reading as a whole class together, the close monitoring that teachers are actually able to do enables us to, first of all, in the lesson, circle the room, listening to all the discussions, picking out and assessing actually on the job, so as it were. And the oracy is at the heart of the practice, really. So it's all about that talking and picking apart right there and then if we do need to catch up any particular children to model one-to-one, whilst the rest of them are all getting on with their independent reading. And then, of course, we move on to standardised testing. So obviously in year 6, we do an awful lot of standardised testing leading up to the SAT, but practicing of how to get our ideas down on paper through really, really, really quick activities every single day enables children to get more confident to actually, when we do the standardised testing, particularly in year 6 and year 5. But we also do big picture practice. So big picture is part of Destination Reader, but it's basically a type of comprehension that has been, we've been given the structure by Destination Reader, but the teachers actually pick the questions themselves and are then able to tailor that questioning to suit their class. So it basically enables us really to work so well in order for us to be able to close the gap. And finally, we've got tailored interventions, which I'm sure a lot of you will be used to doing anyway. So we take children out, reading one-to-one with support staff, and we also have banded books as well. So we're obviously able to work with specific children or one-to-one, either after the lesson or especially in the afternoon as well. So that's basically how we've managed to really close the gap. And it's worked really, really well in our school.
So linking to Elin's work in Key Stage 2, I'm going to go through a little bit of Key Stage 1 and how we support the staff and the children to develop it. So really with reading at Salisbury, there's twin aims for all of our reading sessions. There's the aim for the children, what we want the children to be able to do and how we're going to develop the children, but also for the adults in the school. We talked a little bit about it previously, but it's really, really important to us that the adults are confident at teaching reading, and that doesn't just mean the class teachers. It's all the support staff and in fact all the adults at school. So in Key Stage 1, we have daily reading in small groups of no more than 6, and I'll explain that on the next slide. Every single group is led by a trained adult, and the emphasis is on trained. Every single adult has had the same level of training, whether they're a teacher, whether they're a teaching assistant, whether we used a member of office staff, everyone has had the same level of training. And there's a real focus on independent solving. Children are really actively constructing their own learning, or they're keeping the story or the messages in mind. So for those of you who work in Key Stage 1, you'll know that some of the books can be very simple. The pink level books can be very basic, but there's still an underpinning story within it. And it's really important that from the start, children get to learn how to unpick that story and to be able to talk about the story in more detail, so they're not restricted just to the very simple words that they're decoding on the page. So for the adults, we've got that ongoing professional development. We'll talk about how we do. The real focus is on coaching. Both me and Elin do a lot of coaching with staff within school, and we'll explain how we do that. But really, the professional development is not just a simple training session and off you go. It's daily, weekly, ongoing training and development. The adults have an opportunity to teach a range of children who are learning to read. So it's not always the support staff working with the less able. Sometimes they're going to work with the more able groups. The teachers will be working with the less able. There's a real focus on mixing it up. It's about building the capacity of our staff to move the children on, and crucially about making those judgments about when to do so. So we're not waiting for a test. We're not waiting for a set period of time in the calendar to move the children on. Children learn to read at different speeds, and it's important that no time is lost at moving those children forward. So what does it look like in practice? So far we've done a lot of talking about the theories behind it, but not necessarily what it looks like on the ground. So in our Key Stage 1 reading, our daily supported reading, it's a 30-minute reading session every single day at 9 o'clock. This is for all of our Year 1 and Year 2 children who are still reading below purple or gold. So that's normally about 120 to 130 children in our school, being a 3-form entry, reading in small groups of 6 at any one time. So this means we have about 22 reading groups all running at once. Each group has their own adult, 22 adults. Now, I know immediately most people are going to say, I haven't got 22 adults in my school. And this is really important why the reading through the school needs to be a consistent approach. So we pull adults from all over the school. Every single adult who isn't teaching whole class reading in Key Stage 2 is pulled to come and support in Key Stage 1. So we timetable reading in Key Stage 1 to be at the same time. So it's 9 o'clock for everybody in school. The teachers in Key Stage 2 will be teaching whole class reading, and because there isn't that reliant on teaching small groups in the guided reading model, the teacher is able to confidently do that and teach the whole class. All the other support staff and any other adults we can find are trained and come down and work with Key Stage 1 for half an hour. They read 2 books a week. They read 1 book on the Monday and Tuesday and a second book on the Wednesday and Thursday. So it gives children that reading mileage, which is so important when they're younger. So by the end of the year, they're going to get through 50, 60 books. They've had that daily practice on fluency and decoding. Friday, we spend the whole session on linked activities. And the real importance of that is that background knowledge that we talked about earlier. So, for example, if the children are reading a book on pirates, I've seen children dressing up as pirates and doing role play around pirates. They might be using some of the language from the book. If they're reading a book on, I think one of the books is called Lizard Loses His Tail. I've seen children watching YouTube videos on how, like David Attenborough style videos, on when the lizard loses his tail and what causes that. And they're really looking at unpicking that in real life. So they're seeing real life examples of the stories that they're reading. Our staff really enjoy those sessions. It gives them a chance as well for their creativity to come out. If they're reading books about masks, I've seen support staff making masks with the children and really talking about all the different parts of the masks and when masks might be used. Is it fancy dress parties? Might they be used at Halloween, or different examples? So again, it's giving the children that background knowledge to apply to the text they've read that week, but also any other text that they might face in the future. So that Friday session is a really crucial part to reading in Key Stage 1 as well. The other really important element to our reading is that children can move groups weekly. So the groups are streamed, and we'll talk about how we assess the children, but they can move groups weekly. The staff are really supported in making that judgment as to when that child is ready to move on. And we move children every single week, so they're not held back by waiting for a set assessment point. And that's a really important to not limit children's progress, really. So here's a bit of what a lesson sequence might look like.
Could I just, there's been a couple of questions. Could I just...
of course, yeah.
We've had a question from Kerry and one from Karina as well, asking fairly similar things, just about how is this practice taking place in the current climate?
So I'll come to that slightly on later, but I'm happy to talk about it now. So obviously currently you're right, we have to change things ever so slightly. So we operate in year group bubbles. So we have 3 classes in each year group. So rather than groups of 6, we've increased it to groups of 12, but the core underpinning values are exactly the same. So instead of being able to use adults from all over the school, I'm just using adults from that year group bubble. So instead of running 22 groups, I'm running 8 groups in year 1 and 7 groups in year 2, only using the staff from that year group. So although the groups may be larger at the moment, the actual core values underpinning it and the structure of the lessons is exactly the same. Hopefully we'll be able to get back to that smaller group size. I do think the smaller group size has a real impact, but at least we're still reading daily, we're still unpicking the text, they're still doing all those other elements that we want them to do. So that's kind of how we've tweaked it in the current climate, and I'm working with quite a few schools over the past week or so to look at how their school is set up. I know different schools are having different restrictions on bubble sizes, adult sizes, and to what's going to work for their school. We were open in the summer term. We had about 80% of our year 1 pupils back. So we had quite a lot of opportunity in that summer term to try a few different ways of doing it. So we trialled sort of small reading groups through the day, but still using the same system. And then we trialled doing it the way that we're doing it at the moment. So there are different ways of approaching it. But for our school and the adults that we've got available to us, we're working in our year group bubbles and doing it that way. But the actual structure of the sessions hasn't changed. Hope that answers that. If not, I'm more than happy to chat to people afterwards. Were there any more questions, Georgina?
Sorry, I'm muted. No, I think that was it. Just a comment from Margot as well, saying that they've just started DSR this year and using it in year 2 as part of the recovery curriculum, and they're going to transition to year 1 in the spring term, which is helpful to know as well.
Good to hear.
But no, that was it from questions. Thank you.
That's all right. So this is the structure of a daily supported reading session. So the sessions are about half an hour long, and very similar to what Elin talked about, there are 3 key areas within a lesson. So you've got before the independent reading. So the adult will tell the story to the children, and it really helps the children to become grounded in what the text is going to be about. It prepares them for the reading, so they're not going in cold. They've got a bit of context behind the story, and they're able to sort of understand what they're going to be reading about. They introduce and talk about all the main ideas in the story. The adult then reads the story to the children. Again, with the younger children, it's really important that it's modelled so they can hear, what does good reading look like? Where should I be putting in my expression? What might the author intend for me to, how might I be pronouncing these things? They also have a practice at saying a phrase or sentence from the book. So it could be, I'm trying to think, for example, if I picked Little Red Riding Hood, because everyone knows that story, oh my grandma, what big eyes you have. And all the children will practice that with the expression, with the theatrics, so that they develop their own reading ability. We've all seen those children who can decode beautifully, but it's very robotic. There's no expression, and that's often because of the limited understanding of what they're reading. So from the start, we really practice that with the children. We also go over those learning behaviours, what to do if you get stuck. I don't understand this word, what can I do? So we might pick a different one each session. Use your phonics. It's amazing how many children, I'm sure you've seen it, are very good in their phonics session and don't transfer that to other lessons to begin with. So really reminding them of their phonics skills that they've learned and how they can apply them, for example. It might be reading the rest of the text around it and going back to work out what that word could mean. So we teach those strategies explicitly to the children. The children then get to read independently. Every single day, they'll have at least 15 minutes of reading that text independently. And as Elin has said in Key Stage 2, the adult then goes around and hears all the children as they're all reading. So it's not everyone waiting while we go around the group and everyone reads a page. Everybody is reading the story to themselves through the session, and the adult is going around listening to children at the same time. If they finish the book, they're going back and they're practicing it again to really build up that fluency. After the independent reading is when we look at the responding to the text, those comprehension questions. They might have a cut-up sentence to practice linking the language with the print and to order the sentence and look at the grammar elements within it. So all of that is done within the half an hour session. to support the adults, there are scripts that are written to go with some of the books that are chosen. Some of those scripts are part of the programme that we bought, and other scripts we have written ourselves. So again, in our coaching sessions, we have worked together to develop scripts to support the adults within the session. Again, it's really important that they're co-created. I could have written those scripts and given it to the staff, but that's not as effective as doing it with the staff themselves. So the support staff who are working with those children will look at the questions that are suitable for that text. They'll write them out. And when they come back to that text again with the children, it's activities they've already prepared. It's really important that we're developing it alongside all the adults who are taking part. So coaching sessions. I'm going to talk about our coaching sessions, and I know Elin's got a slide on it later, but it really is at the heart of our reading programme. We run coaching sessions normally every Wednesday for half an hour while the children are in singing assembly. So trying to find a time that you can do that all together. All the providers attend, and we make sure there's a practical and activity in each session so that adults are getting to practice. Whatever we expect the children to do, and what's good practice for teaching children things, is also good practice for teaching adults. It's really important that adults have a chance to practice things themselves. So examples of things we have done: the adults work in pairs to make up the tell the story bit at the beginning. So they've got an opportunity to practice it on somebody else. They do the comprehension questions together. We also looked at vocabulary. Many of our staff were aware of the importance of vocabulary. We did some work from Alex Quigley's book, and we thought we needed to bring that research further into our early reading programme. So we created our own vocabulary cards for the books that we're using. Again, we've chosen a vocabulary that is pertinent to our children, what we think they need. And so as with the children, the coaching is really responsive to the adults' needs. Every day I'm monitoring the early reading sessions. I'm going around, yes, to hear the children read and how they're developing, but also to look at how the staff are teaching the reading. Are there any areas the staff are finding more challenging? How can I support the staff to tweak different parts of their sessions to get the best out of the children? And I take that to develop my coaching sessions. Now, obviously, currently we can't do the coaching sessions live, so we're going to be moving to doing video coaching. I'm still able to move around from a distance with the bubble, so I can still, in my role, still see the children reading, and then we're going to be delivering some coaching virtually. Elin's found a slightly different solution to hers, because her bubble is in year 6, so she needs to stay in year 6 currently. But it's about finding those solutions in the meantime so that coaching isn't lost. It's a really important part of the programme. So it's nice. It's always nice to see what the children do, what they think. So this is taken from last week. So as you can see, this is a bigger group of children doing daily supported reading. They're all still using the same book. This is one of our lowest groups, our pink groups. Those of you who know sort of book bands, it's all linked to book bands. And they're practicing on finding the words, using their finger to all find the same word, and that print to text correspondence. And for the staff, talking to the staff who've had the training and the development, they're now feeling much more confident about delivering reading. And one of our teachers said it's given her the chance to develop the way she questions pupils about stories, and she feels more confident in assessing their ability to infer. And I think that is at the heart of our programme, getting the teacher's confidence up. I don't know if you can see some of the children's comments. I like to collect what the children say. So I've got things like, before Christmas I could not read. Now I can read all the hard books. I want to be on level 50, which doesn't even exist, but that drive behind the children, they want to work hard, they want to push themselves forward because they enjoy the reading sessions. I like reading a book every day. I get to read lots. I like information books best. So giving them that choice about what they like to read, they're making those decisions for themselves from the start. Yes, they have to read fiction and non-fiction, but they're going to have an opinion about what they like. Do they like reading books about monkeys? Do they like reading, fairy stories? But getting them to have their opinions about text from the start. We often expect it for children in Key Stage 2 to just happen, but actually we need to model that to them. Why do you like that book? What's so good about those types of books? Perhaps you'd like to try this type of book. and doing that from the beginning. I've got another here. I like reading my friends. My favourite book is about pirates. So yeah, it's about that social element to reading as well, and I think that's really important.
Rachel, do you mind if I just ask a couple more questions that have come in the chat? Sorry. We've got one from Lynn who's asked, how long did it take before your system was fully embedded and flowing? And also, what were the main pitfalls before the system worked really well?
Yeah, so we've got a little bit on barriers to it later on, but I would say about a term. So we started it at an Easter term. So we had a summer term to develop it. And then I'd say pretty much by the end of a term, staff were really confident, and both Elin and myself were able to work with those adults who still felt less confident. So again, because it's based on coaching, you can kind of prioritise which adults need your time from the start. So those who seem quite confident to begin with, you can let them continue, and then you're going to focus in on the adults who need the immediate level of support, and then kind of work it back from there. So I would say probably a term to get it fully embedded. But to be honest, within about 3 or 4 weeks, the structure was up and running. And because it's so scaffolded for the adults as well, there's lots of support, there's scripts and things that we've written. So if they're not sure, they've got that sort of safety net, if you like, to fall back on. Ellen's worked on a lot of, she does a lot of example books for different year groups. She'll put questions and things together for teachers. So again, they've got that basis to fall back on. So yeah, I'd say sort of 3 or 4 weeks to get up and running, and then about a term until it was fully embedded.
That's helpful, thank you. And then just one from Sarah quickly as well before we move on, just asking, have you adapted Destination Reader for the Year 2 children who are Purple and Beyond?
Yeah. So we do we called it DR Light. So for those of you who know Destination Reader, we've looked at some of the questions that are used in Key Stage 2 children and put it into a younger child's context. So although they're still covering the same areas, we might focus on some of the more retrieval elements and those sentence stems first, and adapting it to children, text at their level. So yeah, that's something we're still developing, but yes, and I've got a slide later that shows how we put all our different systems of reading together through our school for children who are at different levels. So I'll show that, and hopefully that will answer some of those questions. But yeah.
Thank you.
So I know lots of people at the moment, catch up is the new buzzword, and how it's supporting children who potentially may not have been reading for 6 months. So this approach supports catch up really, really well, because it isn't something additional that we have to do. It's already integrated into our practice. So because there's daily reading and the adults are close to what is happening, and they can make those immediate changes. So yes, the children may be starting lower than we might have liked if they've missed a whole term of reading, but that daily reading is hopefully going to bring them up quite quickly. Those children who aren't progressing as quickly as we would like, that tailored support can get in there from the start. So we were able to set up our reading. We started it in week 3. So we had 2 weeks in of our recovery and children settling in. But by week 3, all the children were up and back into their reading systems. So no time has been lost, and the children are reading daily already, and we're seeing them quickly, particularly in Key Stage 1, moving up through those bands really quickly already, and developing that confidence at reading. For those children who aren't going to make that progress that we might like, we're going to start some of the one-to-one phonics, the tutoring. It might be some pre-reading for some of those children, but we already can identify that very quickly just from being close to the children, really. We've got the gap analysis of benchmarking. So although the teachers are assessing, or the adults, I shouldn't say just teachers, although the adults are assessing on an ongoing basis every week, we use benchmarking as a standardisation tool a couple of times through the year. That really helps us to, make sure practitioners' judgments are secure, and if not, we can use it as a training tool in itself with our adults, but also to look at where the gaps are for certain children. Those of you who've used benchmarking before, you'll know you can look at whether it's commonly the child is making phonetic errors, in which case we know we need to do some more phonics support, whether it's mostly grammatical errors, particularly for our EAL learners. Again, that tells us that we need to be doing some more support, perhaps within our reading sessions, or perhaps some extra side tuition on the grammar elements. Perhaps they're making language and meaning errors, and then we know that we need to develop those within our sessions. So that benchmarking is really important, and we do that at least twice a year for every single child, or more often for those children who we might have a concern about. If we can't quite work out what's going on with the child, they're not making the progress we want and we're not quite sure why, we use it as an additional ad hoc assessment tool. Okay, so this is how the reading programs fit together, which is what someone asked. So you can see that we do phonics from nursery. That's really important to get that phonics in from the start, and that carries through into year 1 and then into the autumn term of year 2 for our slower developers, our new to English learners, and if needed, we also do some phonic interventions in Key Stage 2. The daily supported reading, although predominantly for year 1, we do begin it in the summer term of reception for our speedy readers, those children who are already able to read those red and pink books. We'll start that in the summer term. We carry through into year 1 and then into year 2 until children reach gold book band level. So if children are able to read at a gold book band level, they're able to access the third or the higher level SATS paper. So at that point, they can go into the destination reader style lessons within the classroom, where that focus then is on that higher level reading and unpicking those texts. Those kind of those old level 3, that greater depth style text. We also carry on the daily supported reading into year 3 as an intervention group for those slower developers. Again, whether it's just because reading is more challenging for them, whether they haven't been in the country very long, we do get a lot of children join us from abroad with no English, so we need to give them the same opportunities to develop their reading and their English as their peers have had. It just might take a little bit longer. And then destination reader, we call it DR Light for our year 2 children. So we begin that, we've already got some of our year 2 children doing it from now, and kind of as the year goes on, that group gets bigger and they stay with their class teacher, and it's exactly the same structure as in Key Stage 2. We just looked at some of the sentence stems and kind of edited them to make them more appropriate for kind of a year 2 maturity, I suppose, emotional maturity and ability to kind of deal with some of those higher level areas. And then all through Key Stage 2, we use Destination Reader. So kind of hopefully that shows how we fit the programs together, but also tailor it to fit the children. So it's not a one size fits all. Depending on where the children are in their reading journey, we can adapt it to suit them. Okay. So we're going to go into a little breakout. So what are the challenges to implementing such a system? You've heard a little bit about how we do it, and I'm sure people are already thinking about, well, if I did this in my school, I think I'm going to struggle with this. I'm not sure how we manage that. So we thought it would be a good chance for you to talk in groups about what you think the challenges might be. We've already identified some of the challenges we had, and we can talk about them afterwards. But then if there's questions and things that people have got, hopefully we'll be able to answer some of those questions about kind of working around some of those possible barriers or challenges. Okay. We've got most people back. So if I put up what we thought some of the challenges might be, and then we'll have lots of opportunities for people to talk about what they think the challenges are, and maybe me and Elin can answer some of those questions if it's not ones that we've already thought about, and challenges that we faced ourselves. I know in our group we talked about some of them, and I've talked about how we overcame them. So it works. Okay. So there aren't enough staff in Key Stage 1 to run all the groups. So as I said, we use staff from across the whole school to do this. We've used office staff. I've known school to train parents, those parent volunteers, to get them to come in, do all the same training as any other adults, and to train them. And then the ongoing coaching. So if you've got, really willing parents and things, there's no reason why they can't be running groups. Obviously, COVID world is going to be a bit different. Maybe not in COVID system at the moment, but longer term, it really is about utilising any adult you can think of in your school and be creative with it. The number of spaces for all the groups in Key Stage 1, yes, we're a large school, we've got 22 groups. We need somewhere for all those groups to go. So while we might have 3 or 4 groups in one room, it's also about, again, being creative with the use of space. We use our hall, and we have folding canteen tables, pop easily up and down, so we can have 4 or 5 groups in the hall. So we did have to really explore our school building and find spaces for those children who can sit in groups. And again, it was thinking outside the box by using the hall and things like that. We've got teachers in Key Stage 2 not feeling confident to teach that wide range of ability. And we know there's a wide range of ability in a Key Stage 2 class on their own without the support staff there to support them. Elin's going to go through that more detail in the next slide about how she supports teachers to do that, because that wasn't a big concern of staff to begin with. She's worked really hard with the Key Stage 2 teachers to do that, who didn't want to lend their support staff, so to speak, to Key Stage 1 for half an hour every day. And linked to that, I can't release enough staff at once, and when do I fit it in? And I was saying to the people in my group that for us, it was about deciding what's the priority for our school. For us, reading was a priority. So we made that where we wanted it in our timetable, and everything else in school worked around it. So if reading is the school's priority, make it the priority. That you find that ideal scenario that you want, put it in your timetables, and you find ways to make everything else fit. It took a while to do because that structure wasn't there when we first started. Teachers did reading when it suited them in their normal class timetables. They might not have had a distinct reading lesson every single day, for example. In Key Stage 1, they were doing guided reading at a different time every day, which meant we couldn't pull all the adults in. So we did rewrite all the timetables to make sure that we could put all the resources against it. So if reading needs to be a priority in your school, then it is going to be about changing a lot of other things around reading to make it fit.
Absolutely.
Elin, do you want to come in?
Yeah, of course. And I had a really interesting discussion in my breakout room, and it was also, how do we teach the enjoyment of reading? How do you actually teach reading? And one of the things we were saying is actually about teaching how to enjoy reading. So you're not only modeling as teachers how to read, you're also modeling how do I get excited about a text? So if we were looking at a new story, you can go, oh, I've read this story before. Oh, I'm really excited to read it. So the children can see that you're excited about it, and it sort of feeds all the way through. And we also do a lot of work on combining different parts of the curriculum. So we've got our science elements that we use, some of the history and geography, and because of that, it builds that excitement, it builds that interest. Oh yes, I remember we learnt about this in humanities. So that's how we've been doing it. But I do understand that a lot of teachers in Key Stage 2 didn't, certainly at the start, feel confident not only teaching reading, but actually using the DR programme into their classrooms. So how we've been doing it over the last couple of years is basically all about thinking about consistency. And in order to have consistency, you need monitoring and you need coaching, and you need teachers to feel that they are supported and no question is a silly question, and that you are there constantly to help them. But actually what we found is by about 3 weeks, the teachers were really getting into their stride, and they actually noticed that the model was working, that by getting the children to become independent readers and teaching those learning behaviours, it actually makes the teachers' work a lot easier. That's what I found, because actually the children are sort of, by the time they get up to year 6, certainly at the end of year 6, they're sort of doing it for you. And so you can pick apart that, they can learn from each other. And that is why training and coaching right from the beginning and support is so important. And again, that's why consistency is important as well, because as they move from year 3 to year 4, we use the same model and the teachers have had the same training as everybody. So because of that, it literally just moved from one year group to the other. And so there's no different ways, different models that people are using. So actually the children feel settled. And by the time they get up to year 6, I can vouch for it. This is my 3rd year in year 6. I mean, you can just sort of, it's honestly, it's enjoying. I find it enjoying to teach reading. I love it. So just looking at the flowchart here, thinking about consistency in order to get outstanding practice. And the way we do that is we monitor and we offer high levels of support. Previously, I would have been going into classrooms, popping in, checking up on lessons, seeing how the teachers were doing. I would also, as a reading leader in Key Stage 2, be going in for new staff, especially when we first started with the DR programme, actually going into their classrooms and modelling it for them, so that the children then had that foundation, and then the teacher could watch and see and then take over. And in terms of sharing good practice, we video the lessons. We've been doing a lot of videoing. Certainly now, where everything more of what we're doing is going virtual, modelling via video lessons to share good practice has been key. And we're certainly going to be doing more of that this year. And it's not only a great way for training for new teachers, but it's also a fantastic way for us to be able to share that good practice with the teachers who are confident. So because you're then sharing their practice around the school, they sort of feel as if, oh yeah, I'm really good at this. And they feel celebrated. And it's just got a very positive feeling around the school. Then, of course, as we video lessons, if teachers do need more support, do need more training, by videoing the lessons, it enables me and them separately to rewatch the videos, pick apart all the strengths, but also pick apart the elements that they need to build on, they need to work on. And it's self-directed reflection time. And also we can do some peer coaching as well. So what we have done in previous staff training insets is we've actually put the videos up, and if obviously the teachers are happy for us to do it, sharing good practice. And then obviously they're a bit embarrassed, but by the time everyone says, oh, that was brilliant, I loved how you did that, I think I'm going to use it in my lesson, because of that it gives them a really positive feeling and just built on the confidence really. And it was regular. Every single week at the beginning I was popping in, checking up on displays to say, how are you getting on, how are you finding it, is there anything you need me to help you with? Regular feedback has been really important as well. So just yesterday I sent an email out praising teachers, how they were getting on, but also giving them just those quick reminders of how we do comprehension on a Friday, for example. And some extra tips that I found, because whilst I've been doing the Destination Reader programme for coming up to about 5 years now, even I'm finding things that work differently in my classroom. And, it's as a leader of reading, giving those quick emails to say, oh, by the way, really quick tip, I found that this worked in my classroom. You could definitely try that too. So we've started replicating this model virtually with everything going on, because I know we had a couple of things in the chat just saying, how are we able to use what we were doing before, and how, if you're certainly starting with a new model, how are you able to do that with COVID? And I was just certainly say here, videos, and just again keeping it within bubbles, keeping it within year groups, and you've always got more confident people on each floor. Just a lot of talking, basically.
Okay, so that's kind of our key bit. I'm sure there's lots of questions and things in the chat, and we're happy to answer any questions. I know normally we would like to have done this where you can actually see the children and come and watch the sessions, because I think it really helps with the context to see the children and their amazing high quality answers and watching them in practice. And I think we've booked with Challenge Partners to do one in January, hopefully, COVID permitting, so that, we're more happy to have any of you come and visit us for our open day in January and to kind of see it in practice. and hopefully that will help with any understanding and things. But we're more than happy to answer any questions people have now, really.
Yeah, I know this. I've noticed there's quite a few questions in the chats, and some really good questions actually.
Okay, let's have a look.
Do you want me to read some out, or do you guys want to
I can't see the chat at the moment.
I've seen a really good question. Actually, there's quite a few really good questions. But first of all, it's the question: is the text the teacher reads at the beginning of the DR book? So yes, in the model that we currently use, the teacher doesn't not read the whole text, because again, it's on that focus on that independent reading. But certainly at the beginning, usually there's a really small section that the teacher reads, and that gives the opportunity to model all those questioning, the predicting, all those different skills and strategies as well. So thinking aloud. So yes, the teacher does read at the beginning of the destination reader book, and also it sort of enables the teacher to show the children the type of language, how it's meant to be read, you know, depending on the genre. So yes, in answer to that question. And so obviously there is, so there's a really good question about clarifying comprehension on a Friday. So on a Friday, what used to happen is that the children would all have their own different comprehensions. And not only did that create an awful load of workload for teachers, because you've got potentially up to about 6 or 7 different comprehensions, possibly 3, with all different skills, all different answers. Instead, what we've been doing instead is using, with our program, it's called Big Picture, and it's sort of like a big snapshot of all of the learning that they've been doing for that week in a more formal written comprehension style lesson. And it basically enables the teachers the children to familiarise themselves with different question formats. And we don't just only do that in year 6, we actually do it all the way from right at the beginning of Key Stage 2. So by the time they actually get up to year 6, they're really familiar with all the SATs style questions. But of course, it's not just about SATs, it's about just general understanding of how to pick apart a question and what the question is asking them. So again, similarly to the regular destination reader lessons that we do, teachers model exactly how to pick apart a question. What we've got is we've got 4 different types. So we model the skills and, I'm thinking, what type of question is that? Okay, well, this clue tells me that it's a vocabulary question. And we scaffold the children and help them to be able to recognise not only the question type, but how to answer it. And because the whole class doesn't matter about their ability, they all do the same questions, and that everything gets modelled to them. Because of that, the teacher's then able to see, right, this group over here, they're really confident. These 2 children over here, they need a little bit more work. So yeah, that's how we've been doing comprehension on a Friday. It's again a whole class approach where we specifically teach the skills of written comprehension. So yeah, hopefully that answered that question.
Thanks, Elin. There's a few other questions, just having a look at the chat. There's one from Lynn saying, do you have to use Destination Reader at their school uses a mixture of schemes?
Well, I mean, Rachel, you can say a bit, but I would definitely say that I know there's a lot of different programs out there. What we've obviously decided to do is to stick to one. DR and DS, obviously, they link together, and that just creates consistency. But we have obviously adapted it to suit our school and to suit our children and our staff as well. So I don't know, Rachel, if you want to say.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously, you know, we're going to say to use those schemes. That's what we found our preferred model is. But I think there's no reason why you can't apply some of the key concepts that we use into systems you've already got in place. If they're working in your school for your children, there's no reason why you can't introduce coaching alongside whatever system and things you've got in school at the moment. You know, you can still do those elements within it. It could well be, and I think that's really the main part is you can apply some of the key concepts, but as Elin said, consistency
Yeah.
Across all the classes, I think.
And we just really, the main things that we focus on at Salisbury is all to do with coaching, consistency, and the structure. So if you've got those three elements, it creates a strong reading program where teachers enjoy reading, the children enjoy reading. So yeah, it's all about coaching, consistency, and structure. That's what I would definitely say, what we'd say here.
Thanks a lot. We've got a question from Catherine as well, saying that they were talking about children in year 2 who've come back with a lot of phonics gaps. She's just wondering, did you find this? And if so, how have you addressed it?
So yeah, I mean, I think all of us are going to have children who've come back with gaps, particularly in phonics and things. So yes, some of our children have got gaps and things, but so because the phonics sessions run separately at different time of the day, the children are streamed for phonics based on their assessments that we've carried out. So we carried out the assessments quite early on, and so the teachers are finding those gaps within their groups and teaching to those gaps from the start. So as we talk about, phonics is a key element of early reading. It's only an element of the whole reading program. So yes, we have found those gaps, and we're already closing those gaps quite quickly. And I think a lot of that was about that early assessment, those first sort of couple of weeks in, that very short, low key, low stakes, not high pressure testing, one-to-one, a quick phonics check assessment of where we thought they should be. And the adults who are teaching those groups can see that and teach to those gaps from the start. So, and I know linked to that, someone's asked about how we fit in Read, Write, Ink and Daily Supported Reader and literacy. So we do spend a lot of time on reading. So our Key Stage 1 children have their half an hour daily supported reader session. We've adapted Read, Write, Ink for our children. So we don't follow the Read, Write, Ink whole hour session. We have a 25 to 30 minute phonics session. And then we have our writing literacy session as well, about 45 minutes in Key Stage 1. So that's how we managed to fit it all in. Again, because for us reading is a priority, we think the children need to be able to access, in order to access the rest of the curriculum at Key Stage 2 successfully, they need to be confident and competent readers. So we are happy to put the time in and the focus on that in Key Stage 1 to give them the best chance at accessing the whole curriculum in Key Stage 2. So that answers a couple of questions there, I think.
Thanks, Rachel. There's a couple of people also asking about the comprehension questions and saying it'd be great to see kind of examples of them, or is this something you've produced yourselves, or are these kind of part of the programme?
So obviously Big Picture is part of the programme, and what DR have actually done is that when you sign up to the programme, they actually give you types of questions that you can model and then adapt. Which obviously what the teachers have been doing. What I would also say as well, what we've also been doing is looking. I'm obviously in year 6, so I actually look at the SAT papers and then I check and see exactly, right, how is this question structured? Right, I'm now going to use that into the text that I've been doing. But the Big Picture model does give you the different types of questions, and what it does, it breaks it down into 4 different types. So one of them is vocabulary. The other one is thinking and searching, which is basically inference. And the top of my head, summarizing is another one. And gosh, it's funny, I just planned a Big Picture lesson. But basically what it does break it down into 4 separate areas, which helps the children, and obviously helps the teachers be able to teach it. So the children go, right, that's a vocabulary question. That is so they're called right there questions. So it's the answer will usually be right there. So for example, what did John have for breakfast? And it will be those questions. Okay, right, that's a what, right there type of question. I know because it begins with a what. So then the children can use those skills, and then and then they can obviously know how to answer the questions. But again, it also helps teachers with being able to set up and to tailor the questions to fit the actual text. So yeah, hopefully that answers it really. But certainly with if you came to visit. Fingers crossed, in January, you'll be able to have a look at some books. You'll be able to pop in and have a look and see how different teachers, how we use it. I mean, we could even have some classrooms and some teachers actually just doing a big picture lesson, I think that would be incredibly useful for teachers to be able to see, because I know the teaching of comprehension, whilst teaching of reading is one thing, the teaching of comprehension is, whilst it is linked, it is, because it's a different part of reading, it takes a different set of skills.
And I've noticed one more question that a few people have asked about the texts that are used and whether it links to writing. So I think that's a really important part of our programme, is that we've adapted it to suit our children and our curriculum. Elin's worked really hard, particularly in Key Stage 2, at choosing text. Some of the texts we already had in school, but also choosing high quality texts that fit with our curriculum. So sometimes they'll fit with the writing the children are going to be doing in their literacy lessons. Sometimes they'll be linking with the humanities curriculum. So it all feeds into, the reading has a purpose and it links with things. And sometimes those texts will link with the science curriculum, for example. So there aren't set texts that we have to use as part of a programme. It is about using texts that are suitable for your children and your context, and using the structure of the programme to develop the children in that way. It's not about having set texts and buying in large amounts of text in Key Stage 2. I hope that kind of answers that a little bit.
I think it does, yeah. And actually really, really well. And I also just want to say one more thing, going back to the comprehension reading and how to teach comprehension is, which I actually really should have mentioned, but actually every single lesson is technically a comprehension lesson, because whilst we've got the big picture questions formulated by the teachers on a Friday, in Key Stage 2, from Monday all the way through to Thursday, what we have is questions they call selfies. So it's like a snapshot question, and that in itself is the comprehension. And there'll be vocabulary matching. It'll be very short, but it's a snapshot of everything that they've learned. So they're writing down their ideas sometimes as well. So our lesson might be on predicting, and they had some great discussions about what they think is going to happen next in the story. We give them 15 or so minutes just to really quickly write down all of their ideas to do with predicting. And that in itself is actually a style of comprehension. But because it's so small, it's in small chunks, by the time we get to Friday big picture, the children are actually really, really confident. And the children know, oh, this is a vocabulary question. We did something similar on Monday. So that's another tip that I would certainly give teachers, is at the end of every lesson, 15 minutes, no more than that, a really short, small snapshot of whatever you want them to focus on. Today, I know in my classroom, they're actually ordering the events of the text. We're doing There's a Boy in the Girls' Bathroom. And they're just for the first 5 chapters, what I've now done is, just for a Thursday, is they're now going to order the events of what happened. And that is actually a SATs question that they encounter in Year 6. And they can do that in Year 3. So by the time they do get to sort of more standardized testing further up the school, they're not fazed by it. They're completely comfortable with it. Obviously you always got 1 or 2 that need a little bit of help and support, but actually the majority of the class, they feel really confident and they feel ready. So it's mainly about giving the children the tools and the skills to be able to do that, and the confidence. So yeah, that's what I would say. Mini comprehensions all the way throughout the week, 1 question, and then on Friday you can go into more detail with it. Hopefully that helps. I mean, that's like a...
Thanks, Elin. I think there's just one more question I answer really, really quickly before we just wrap up, because we've got a bit of time. Catherine's asked, if you're doing a whole class text, how do you ensure that children in Year 5 or 6 read a text that's actually at their instructional level? Yeah,
that's a really, really good question, because I know that was one of the things that I used to think right at the beginning. What I would say, so usually what we do is that on Monday and Tuesday, and essentially all the way throughout the week, but mainly on Monday and Tuesday, we focus on that one whole class text. And I know somebody asked if we do the same text for reading as we do for writing. Because of everything going on at the moment, we actually are. So we've combined the text we do for reading, we do it for writing, because it actually just saves the teachers a lot of time, because everything's trying to get back into the curriculum. I digress. Go back. So on Monday and Tuesday, we've got a whole class text system where the teacher models it, independent reading, short selfie, and that's how we do it. Now, for the children who that isn't at their level, what I would say is that because they're getting that modelling and they're getting the mixed ability, they've got much more opportunity rather than just reading in their group at their level. By the time they get to Key Stage 2, they've got a lot more examples and a lot more ideas to share. That's the first thing I'd say. And then on Wednesday and Thursday, what we do, obviously at the moment, we're still getting back into that system, but on Wednesdays and Thursdays, the teacher starts with the whole class text. At the moment, for me, it's There's a Boy in the Girls' Bathroom. We read one of the pages together very, very quickly, and then instead of going off to read the next couple of pages of the whole class text with their partner, what they then do is we then go off into groups of leveled texts. So depending on their book band, so some of them last year were on silver, the top band was cream, so we're all on that. So actually that is the opportunity for the next 25 minutes on Wednesdays and Thursdays of more leveled texts that are appropriate, especially for those children that do need that extra support. So that generally tends to happen on a Wednesday and a Thursday, but there is still that whole class modelling of the whole class text, just as a reminder, so that they know it's the same lesson rather than a totally different style of lesson right at the very beginning. But we don't call it guided reading because it is a different system, so it does work slightly differently. And then of course on Friday we've got the big picture. But again, all of this is to do with coaching, training, and it's the consistency across the school. So it seems like a lot, but the children are so used to it now, and so are the teachers, that actually they just know what to do. So that's what I'd say.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. I think we've run over by 1 minute, so I think it's time just to quickly wrap up. Thank you so much, Rachel and Elin, for giving up your time. That has been absolutely brilliant.